Hello, and welcome back. I'm glad you found your way here again tonight. Maybe today was long, or maybe you're simply the kind of person who'd rather drift off, thinking about something vast and quiet than count sheep in the dark. Either way, you're exactly where you need to be. There's nothing left for you to do right now except rest. Let your shoulders sink a little heavier into the bed. Let your breathing slow. Let your thoughts loosen their grip on the day the way a hand slowly opens. Because tonight, we're not traveling out to distant galaxies or nameless stars. Tonight, we're staying close to home. We're going to drift gently through the story of the planet beneath you right now. The Earth. A quiet blue world spinning through the dark, older than any memory, holding more mystery in its crust and its oceans and its sky than most of us ever pause to notice. You'll hear about its molten heart, its wandering continents, its restless oceans, and the thin, fragile blanket of air that makes everything you've ever loved possible. Some of it may surprise you. Some of it may simply settle over you like a warm blanket, familiar and strange, all at once. If any of this helps you unwind, consider subscribing to Drowsy with Facts so you can drift off with us again tomorrow night. For now, let's begin. The Earth formed almost 4.5 billion years ago, condensing slowly out of a vast spinning cloud of dust and gas left over from the birth of the sun. In its earliest years, it wasn't the calm blue marble we know now. It was a molten, restless sphere, its surface a churning ocean of liquid rock, bombarded relentlessly by debris, still drifting through the young solar system. There was no blue sky yet, no gentle tide washing against a shoreline, just heat and pressure, and the slow, patient work of gravity pulling everything into a single rounded shape. Not long after Earth formed, something enormous struck it. A planet-sized object, roughly the size of Mars, collided with the young Earth in a catastrophic impact so violent it's hard to picture. The debris flung out by that collision, scattered in a ring around our still-forming world, gradually gathered itself together under its own gravity. That debris became the moon. Every time you glance up at it, hanging pale and quiet above you, you're looking at the scattered remains of the same cataclysm that shaped the Earth itself. Beneath your feet right now, far deeper than any mine or borehole has ever reached, the Earth carries a heart of solid iron and nickel, roughly the size of the moon, glowing at temperatures close to the surface of the sun. Surrounding that solid inner core is an outer core of molten metal, churning slowly, and it's this slow churning motion, this vast turning of liquid metal deep in the dark, that generates the Earth's magnetic field, an invisible shield stretching far out into space, quietly protecting everything living on the surface from the raw force of the solar wind. Without that magnetic field, the Earth's atmosphere would likely have been stripped away long ago, the way it was on Mars. Instead, it wraps around the planet like a slow, silent embrace, deflecting charged particles that would otherwise scour the surface clean of air and water. You've never seen it, never felt it directly, and yet it has been quietly guarding you every single day of your life. The ground beneath you is not as solid or permanent as it feels. The Earth's outer shell is broken into enormous plates, drifting slowly across the molten layer beneath them, moving at roughly the same speed your fingernails grow. Over millions of years, these plates carry entire continents across the face of the planet, colliding to raise mountain ranges, pulling apart to open new oceans, sliding past one another in slow grinding movements that occasionally release as earthquakes. Everything you think of is fixed and unchanging. The shape of the coastlines, the position of the continents, is simply a single frame in a very long, very slow film. Long ago, all of Earth's land masses were joined together into a single vast continent, one that scientists now call Pangaea. It began to break apart roughly 200 million years ago, drifting slowly outward in different directions until it became the scattered continents we know today. And it isn't finished. The continents are still moving, still drifting, and in tens of millions of years they will have rearranged themselves once again into shapes we can only guess at now. The tallest mountain on Earth, Everest, rises higher than any other point on land, but it isn't actually the tallest mountain measured base to peak. That title belongs to Mauna Kea, a volcano in Hawaii, whose base lies deep beneath the surface of the ocean. If you measured it from where it truly begins, far below the waves, to its snow-capped summit, it would tower even higher than Everest itself, most of its height simply hidden beneath the sea. And speaking of the sea, the ocean holds far more mystery than most people ever pause to consider. More than 80% of it remains unexplored, unmapped, and unseen by human eyes. We have, in some ways, better maps of the surface of Mars than we do of our own ocean floor. Down in its deepest trench, the Mariana Trench, the pressure is so immense it would crush an unprotected human instantly. And yet, even there, in complete darkness, under crushing weight, life quietly persists. The ocean is deep enough in that same trench to submerge Mount Everest entirely, with over a mile of water still remaining above its peak. It's almost impossible to hold that scale in your mind. An entire mountain swallowed whole, disappearing into darkness with room to spare. The water in that ocean, and in every ocean on Earth, is ancient, older in fact than the planet's oceans as we know them today, cycling endlessly between sky and sea and stone. Water evaporates from the ocean surface, rises invisibly into the sky, gathers into clouds and falls again as rain, soaking into soil, filling rivers and finding its way eventually back to the sea. The same water molecules have been making this quiet journey for billions of years. Some of the water in the glass beside your bed may once have fallen as rain on a forest that no longer exists, in a climate the Earth no longer remembers. The atmosphere wrapped gently around all of this is thinner than most people imagine. If the Earth were the size of an apple, its atmosphere would be thinner than the apple's skin. Nearly everything you've ever known, every breath, every cloud, every sunset, happens within that impossibly thin layer, a fragile blanket of gas clinging to the surface of a spinning stone. The sky above you is blue for a quiet, simple reason. Sunlight, though it looks white to your eyes, is actually made of every color at once. As that light passes through the atmosphere, its blue wavelengths scatter far more easily than the others, bouncing across the sky in every direction until the whole sky above you seems to glow with that same soft blue scattered light, finding its way to your eyes from every angle at once. At sunset, that same effect stretches the light further, scattering away even more of the blue before it reaches you, leaving behind the slow orange and red glow that settles over the horizon each evening. The same quiet physics, simply viewed through a longer, lower slice of sky. The Earth spins on its axis once every 24 hours, carrying you around at a speed of roughly 1,000 miles an hour at the equator, though you never feel it, the way you don't feel the smooth motion of a train gliding evenly along its tracks. That spin is slowly, almost imperceptibly, winding down. Billions of years ago, a single day on Earth lasted only a few hours. The days have been growing longer, slowly, ever since, stretched out gently by the gravitational pull of the moon. That same pull from the moon is responsible for the tides quietly rising and falling along every coastline on Earth, twice a day, pulled by a gravity so gentle you'd never feel it standing still, and yet strong enough to move entire oceans. The moon itself is slowly drifting away from us, moving outward by about 1.5 inches every year, so slowly that it will be many millions of years before it makes any real difference at all. But it does something else for us, something far more important than tides. Its gravity gently stabilizes the tilt of the Earth's axis, keeping our seasons steady and predictable. Without the moon's quiet influence, the Earth's tilt might wobble chaotically over long stretches of time, and the gentle rhythm of the seasons you've known your whole life might never have settled into anything so stable at all. That tilt, by the way, roughly 23.5 degrees, is the entire reason seasons exist at all. As the Earth makes its year-long journey around the sun, that tilt means different parts of the planet lean toward or away from the sun's light at different times of year, bathing one hemisphere in long, warm days while the other settles into shorter, colder ones. It has nothing to do with distance from the sun, and everything to do with that quiet, steady lean. A year, in truth, isn't quite the clean 365 days we treat it as. Earth actually takes about 6 extra hours to complete its journey around the sun. Those extra hours are quietly gathered up, year after year, until they add up to a full extra day. Which is why, every 4 years, February gains an extra date, a small correction to keep our calendars in step with the sky. Long, long ago, the Earth passed through ages of ice, entire epochs when vast sheets of ice crept down across the continents, burying forests and carving valleys that still shape the landscape today. These ice ages came and went in slow, rhythmic cycles, driven by tiny shifts in the Earth's orbit and tilt, changes so small you'd never notice them in a single lifetime, and yet powerful enough, given enough time, to bury half a continent in ice. Even now, at the top and bottom of the world, ancient ice still remains, holding within it tiny bubbles of air trapped thousands of years ago, frozen samples of an atmosphere long since changed. Scientists can drill down into that ice and read those bubbles like pages in a very old, very cold book, learning what the air itself was like long before anyone was here to breathe it. The coldest place on Earth is a remote research station in Antarctica, where temperatures have dropped low enough to make skin freeze in minutes, low enough that breath itself can crackle and fall as tiny ice crystals before it even leaves the air in front of your face. And yet, not so very far away in geological terms, the hottest temperature ever recorded on Earth's surface was measured in a desert valley so dry and so exposed that the ground itself can grow hot enough to cook an egg without any flame at all. The same planet holds both of these places at once, one impossibly cold, one impossibly hot, spinning quietly through space together. Deserts, in fact, cover far more of the Earth's surface than most people realize. Not only the hot, sandy places you might picture, but also the frozen, wind-scoured plains of Antarctica, which qualify by definition as the largest desert on Earth. A desert, after all, is simply a place that receives very little rainfall. And by that quiet definition, ice can be just as much a desert as sand. Rain itself falls unevenly across the Earth in strange and beautiful extremes. Some places on the planet can go years without a single drop, their soil cracked and silent under a relentless sun. Other places are so soaked in rainfall that some regions measure among the wettest places on Earth, drenched almost daily by warm, heavy rain rolling in from the sea. Beneath the ground in certain parts of the world, water has carved out vast hidden cave systems over millions of years, slowly dissolving stone, opening enormous underground caverns large enough to hold entire skyscrapers in complete darkness. Rivers still quietly flowing through passages no human has ever seen. Volcanoes, too, tell their own slow story. Around the edges of the Pacific Ocean lies a vast curving chain of volcanic activity and earthquakes known as the Ring of Fire, where a large share of the world's volcanic eruptions and tremors quietly gather, tracing the boundaries of the shifting plates deep below. Some volcanoes on Earth have been erupting in one form or another for longer than recorded history stretches back, slow and continuous, glowing quietly for centuries while entire civilizations rose and fell around them, barely noticing the mountains' slow breathing in the distance. Earthquakes, born from the same restless plates, release their energy in sudden shudders that can be detected with sensitive enough instruments from almost anywhere on the planet. The whole Earth quietly ringing faintly like a bell struck far away, long after the shaking itself has stopped. Despite all this restless motion, the Earth remains from space an extraordinarily calm and beautiful sight. Astronauts who have seen it from orbit often describe a quiet, overwhelming feeling at the sight of it. A fragile blue and white sphere suspended alone in the vast dark, with no visible borders, no lines dividing one country from another, just oceans and clouds and land, all blurred quietly together into a single, whole world. From that same distance, the Earth is the only known planet with liquid water openly flowing across its surface, the only world we've yet found where oceans, rivers, and rain exist together in such abundance. It's this water, more than anything else, that makes the planet what it is. A blue world glowing softly against the black, unlike anything else we have ever found. And within that water and across the land, life has taken an almost unimaginable number of forms. Scientists estimate that Earth may be home to millions of distinct species, and new ones are still being discovered every year, tucked into rainforest canopies, deep ocean trenches, and quiet mountain valleys that few humans have ever wandered through. Some of that life exists in places that seem almost impossible to survive in at all. Near scalding volcanic vents on the ocean floor in complete darkness, under crushing pressure, entire communities of strange creatures thrive, drawing their energy not from sunlight, which never reaches that far down, but from the chemicals seeping up from the Earth's molten interior itself. Other living things have been found buried deep within solid rock, miles beneath the surface, in conditions so extreme it seems impossible anything could endure them, quietly existing on timescales far slower than anything we usually think of as living, patient beyond imagination. The oldest living things on Earth today are almost impossible to picture in ordinary terms. Certain trees, standing quietly in remote forests, have been alive for thousands of years, their rings holding a slow record of seasons long since past, growing steadily through the entire span of human civilization. Even older than that, certain simple organisms have persisted in recognizable form for far longer than complex life has existed at all, quiet and unremarkable, floating through ancient oceans in nearly the same shape they hold today, largely unchanged since long before anything resembling an animal ever swam beside them. Long before any of that complex life existed, Earth's early atmosphere was almost entirely without oxygen, filled instead with gases that would be poisonous to breathe today. It was only slowly, over enormous stretches of time, as early microscopic life began, quietly releasing oxygen as a byproduct of its own survival, that the atmosphere gradually transformed into something breathable at all. In a very real sense, the air filling your lungs right now is the patient, accumulated exhale of billions of years of quiet, biological work. The Earth's crust, the thin outer shell you and everything you love stands upon, is remarkably thin compared to the planet as a whole, thinner relative to the Earth's total size than the skin of an apple relative to its flesh. Beneath that thin crust lies the mantle, a slow, thick layer of rock that behaves almost like a very heavy, very patient liquid, flowing so slowly that it takes millions of years for it to circulate even once. It's this slow churning of the mantle, deep beneath your feet, that quietly drives the movement of the continents above it, dragging plates across the surface the way a very slow, very powerful current might carry along anything floating gently on its surface. Earth's gravity, though it feels perfectly constant and unchanging to you, actually varies slightly depending on where you stand. Regions with denser rock underground or closer to the planet's bulging equator exert slightly different pulls, subtle enough that you'd never notice it in daily life, but real enough that satellites orbiting far overhead can detect the difference with quiet precision. The Earth isn't a perfect sphere at all, in fact. It bulges very slightly at the equator and flattens slightly at the poles, the gentle result of its own spin, the same way a ball of dough might spread outward if you spun it quickly on a table. It's a shape so close to a perfect sphere that you'd never notice the difference standing on its surface. But the Earth's own true shape is a little softer, a little rounder at the middle than the tidy circles you might picture. Far above your head right now, the Earth's atmosphere fades gradually into space, rather than stopping at any clear, hard edge. There's no true boundary where air ends and space begins. Just a slow, gentle thinning, layer by layer, until the last stray molecules drift so far apart that the emptiness of space simply takes over. Within that atmosphere, weather itself is driven by an enormous, patient engine. Warm air rising near the equator, cool air sinking near the poles, and the Earth's steady spin bending all of that movement into the great, looping wind patterns that carry storms and rain and quiet, clear skies around the entire globe, day after day, season after season. Lightning, born from that same restless atmosphere, strikes the Earth an extraordinary number of times every single day, flickering silently and constantly somewhere on the planet at every single moment. Even while you sleep peacefully, under a calm, clear sky far away. The auroras that shimmer green and purple across the polar skies are created when charged particles from the sun collide gently with the Earth's magnetic field, funneling down toward the poles and colliding with the upper atmosphere, glowing softly the way a very slow, very quiet kind of fire might glow, entirely painless, entirely silent, visible only as light. The Earth's poles quietly and slowly wander. The magnetic North Pole isn't fixed in place at all, but drifts gradually across the Arctic over decades, pulled along by the slow churning of molten metal deep within the planet's core, moving your compass's true direction by careful, patient degrees over the span of a human lifetime. Even more remarkably, the Earth's entire magnetic field has flipped entirely, many times throughout its long history. North becoming south, south becoming north, in a process so slow it takes thousands of years to complete, recorded quietly in the magnetic alignment of ancient rock, frozen in place the moment it cooled and hardened long ago. The rocks themselves, in certain very old places on Earth, are staggering to think about. Some of the oldest rocks ever found are billions of years old, formed not so very long in the planet's own timeline after the Earth itself first cooled enough to hold a solid surface at all. Silent witnesses to nearly the entire span of the planet's existence. Diamonds formed deep within the Earth, under crushing heat and pressure, are carried up toward the surface only rarely, through rare and violent volcanic pipes, arriving at the surface after having spent, in some cases, over 1 billion patient years, slowly crystallizing in the dark below. Gold and other precious metals scattered through Earth's crust are thought to have arrived originally from distant cosmic events entirely. The violent collisions of ancient neutron stars whose scattered debris eventually became part of the very cloud of dust and gas that later formed the Earth itself. In a quiet, strange sense, a portion of every gold ring ever made began its journey among the stars. The air pressure surrounding you right now at sea level is a force distributed so evenly and constantly across your entire body that you never feel it at all. An invisible weight equivalent to a small car resting across your shoulders, balanced perfectly by the same pressure pushing back from within you, so quietly matched you'd never suspect it was there. Sound itself behaves differently depending on where you are on the planet, carried at different speeds through warm air than through cold, which is why voices and distant sounds can sometimes seem to travel strangely far across a still, cold night, bending gently through layers of temperature stacked quietly above the ground. The Earth's rotation is the quiet reason for something else you may never have thought about. Why hurricanes spin one direction north of the equator and the opposite direction to the south, gently curved by the same subtle force called the Coriolis effect that nudges ocean currents and wind patterns into their great looping, planet-wide paths. Ocean currents themselves form a vast, slow, interconnected system, carrying warm water from the tropics toward the poles and cold water back toward the equator. A journey so long and so slow that a single drop of water might take over 1,000 years to complete the full, patient loop around the entire planet. Some of the largest living structures on Earth aren't on land at all, but built quietly beneath the waves by countless tiny coral creatures, growing slowly over thousands of years into structures so large They're visible even from space, a patient accumulation of small, quiet lives building something far larger than any one of them could ever imagine. Forests too cover a vast share of the Earth's land, breathing slowly in and out with the seasons, absorbing and releasing enormous quantities of the very air you breathe, an enormous quiet green lung stretched across entire continents. Beneath those forests, and beneath every patch of soil on Earth, lies a hidden world almost too small to imagine, teeming with organisms in such staggering numbers that a single handful of healthy soil may hold more individual living things than there are people on the entire planet. The Earth's oceans, forests, and soil together form a quiet, deeply interconnected system, each part gently supporting the others, water cycling from sea to sky to forest and back again in a rhythm so old and so steady that it has continued largely uninterrupted since long before anything like a human first looked up and wondered about the sky. High above you, the thin atmosphere you've been drifting through all night isn't a single uniform layer, but several stacked quietly on top of one another. Closest to the ground lies the troposphere, where nearly all of Earth's weather lives. Every cloud, every storm, every gentle breeze moving through it. Above that sits the stratosphere, calm and steady, home to the ozone layer, a thin, quiet shield that absorbs the sun's harsher light before it ever reaches you. Higher still, the air grows so thin it can barely be called air at all, thinning out gradually through the mesosphere and thermosphere, until at the very edge it fades so gently into space that no one has ever quite agreed on exactly where the sky ends and the universe begins. It's in that upper atmosphere, most nights, that Earth quietly puts on a show that almost no one is awake to see. Countless tiny fragments of rock and dust, remnants of ancient comets and shattered asteroids, streak into the atmosphere every single night, burning up instantly in brief streaks of light we call shooting stars. Far more of them fall than most people realize. The sky is quietly, constantly, softly falling, just usually too faint and too fast for anyone to notice. Beneath the waves, an enormous share of the oxygen you breathe with every slow breath tonight didn't come from forests at all, but from the ocean. Tiny drifting organisms called phytoplankton, far too small to see with the naked eye, quietly photosynthesized by the trillions across the sunlit surface of every sea. And together, they produce even more of the world's oxygen than all the rainforests on land combined. Somewhere in this very breath, there may be oxygen that began its journey as a single, invisible cell, drifting in warm water, far out at sea. The Earth has not always looked the way it looks now, and it will not always look this way again. Long before humans existed, the planet passed through several great extinctions, moments when the vast majority of living species vanished within a geological instant, undone by volcanic upheavals or asteroid impacts or slow shifts in climate too great for life to keep pace with. And yet each time, life quietly began again, filling the empty spaces left behind with new forms, patient and persistent, across millions of years. Even the deserts you might picture as timeless and unchanging have not always been deserts at all. The Sahara, now the largest hot desert on Earth, was once, in a period not so long ago in geological terms, a green and fertile landscape dotted with lakes and rivers, home to grasses and animals where endless dunes now stretch instead. slow shifts in Earth's orbit, tilting the planet almost imperceptibly, were enough over thousands of years to turn a green world to sand, and may, given enough time, turn it back again. Rivers, too, carry their own quiet history. The longest rivers on Earth wind for thousands of miles, gathering rain and snowmelt from entire continents, carrying it patiently toward the sea. One river alone, deep in the heart of a vast rainforest, releases more fresh water into the ocean than the next several largest rivers on Earth combined. A slow brown flood pouring endlessly into blue. Ice, though it seems still and silent, holds an enormous share of the Earth's fresh water locked quietly away. If every glacier and ice sheet on the planet were to melt, sea levels would rise by an amount that's difficult to picture standing on dry land, enough to quietly redraw the shape of every coastline on Earth. For now, they remain frozen, vast and patient, holding that water gently in place. Animals across the Earth have learned to listen to the planet in ways humans never developed. Certain birds, migrating thousands of miles between seasons, are believed to sense the Earth's magnetic field directly, reading it like an invisible map stretched across the sky, guiding them home across oceans and continents without a single visible landmark. Sea turtles, born on a single stretch of beach, may wander the entire ocean for years before returning to that same shore, guided by the same quiet magnetic thread. Beneath the forest floor, trees are far less solitary than they appear. Vast underground networks of fungus link the roots of trees together across entire forests, quietly passing nutrients, water, and even warning signals from one tree to another. Scientists have started calling it the Wood Wide Web, a slow, patient conversation happening constantly beneath your feet, in the dark, in every forest on Earth. The Earth itself, if you could listen closely enough, is never truly silent, even in its stillness. Sensitive instruments have detected a constant, extremely faint hum resonating through the planet, far below the range of human hearing, produced by the endless, restless motion of ocean waves pressing against the seafloor. The whole Earth, quietly, constantly, hums to itself, a sound too low and too soft for you to ever hear directly, but present, patient, always there. And far above that hum, in the space between the ground and the sky, lightning storms flashing somewhere on Earth at every single moment create a very different kind of rhythm, one so steady and so global that scientists can measure it as something like a heartbeat for the entire planet. A slow electromagnetic pulse circling endlessly between the Earth's surface and the lower edge of space. Coral reefs, fragile as they seem, have endured on Earth for hundreds of millions of years, quietly surviving ice ages, shifting seas, and countless slow changes in climate, always finding a way to rebuild themselves, patiently, one tiny creature at a time, even after being nearly wiped away entirely. Even salt, scattered so casually across a dinner table, tells a quiet story about the Earth. In certain dry corners of the world, ancient seas long since evaporated have left behind vast, flat plains of salt, stretching so far and so smooth that, after rain, they become the largest natural mirrors on the planet, reflecting the sky back at itself so perfectly it becomes difficult to tell where the ground ends and the clouds begin. Every drop of water resting quietly in a glass beside your bed tonight is part of a loop older than any living thing. Earth doesn't make new water. it only moves the same finite amount of it, endlessly, between ocean and sky, and root and rain. The water you drink today may once have been swallowed by a creature that lived millions of years before the first humans ever stood upright, carried forward patiently through an unbroken cycle stretching back further than memory. Far off in the future, the Earth's own restless plates are expected to carry the continents back together once again, slowly drifting inward over hundreds of millions of years, into a new single landmass some scientists have already given a name, imagining a distant future supercontinent gathered back into one, the way it was once gathered long before you, long before anything you'd recognize existed at all, long before satellites or space stations existed. No human being had ever seen the whole of the Earth at once. It wasn't until astronauts finally looked back from beyond the moon that anyone truly saw it. A small, bright blue and white sphere, hanging alone against an endless black. Many of them have described the same quiet, overwhelming feeling at that sight, a sense of how fragile and how whole the planet looked from the distance, with no borders visible at all. Just oceans and clouds and land blurred gently together into a single, quiet world. Beneath the ocean surface, in the deep dark where sunlight never reaches, the sea is far from empty or lifeless. Countless creatures there create their own light entirely, glowing softly through chemical reactions in their bodies. A slow, drifting galaxy of living light scattered through the black water, blinking and pulsing in patterns no one fully understands. In certain shallow bays at just the right time of year, this same glow rises close enough to the surface that a single oar or a hand trailing through the water at night can leave a soft trail of blue-green light behind it, as if the sea itself were quietly glowing back at the sky. The ground beneath a volcano, for all the destruction it can bring, often becomes some of the most fertile land on Earth. Volcanic ash, rich in minerals, breaks down slowly into soil so nourishing that entire civilizations have chosen, again and again throughout history, to build their farms and villages in the shadow of mountains that could, in time, erupt once more. It's a quiet trade many communities have made without even realizing it. Danger in exchange for abundance. Human history itself has always followed the quiet logic of the Earth, long before anyone mapped it consciously. The earliest civilizations rose almost without exception along the banks of great rivers, where seasonal floods left behind soil rich enough to grow food reliably year after year. The rhythm of human life for most of history was simply the rhythm of water moving across the land, rising and falling with a patience far older than any calendar. Even the rain falling over certain rainforests today isn't only arriving from the ocean. Enormous rainforests generate a portion of their own rainfall, drawing water up from their soil and releasing it back into the sky through millions of leaves, forming what some scientists have called flying rivers. Invisible currents of moisture drifting high above the canopy, falling again as rain, sometimes hundreds of miles from where it first rose. The longest mountain range on Earth isn't found on any continent at all. Hidden beneath the ocean, a vast chain of underwater mountains circles the entire globe, stretching far longer than any range on land, most of it never seen by human eyes, glowing faintly here and there with the slow orange heat of fresh volcanic rock, quietly building new ocean floor in the permanent dark. Islands, too, are sometimes born rather than simply discovered. On rare occasions, undersea volcanoes have risen so persistently that they broke the ocean surface entirely within just a few years, creating brand new land where none had existed before. Bare volcanic rocks slowly, patiently becoming home to the first wind-blown seeds and the first quiet footholds of life. Beneath your feet, the deep heat radiating from the Earth's core hasn't only survived from the planet's molten birth. A significant share of it is still being generated today, quietly, by the slow, radioactive decay of elements buried deep within the rock. An ancient furnace that has kept the planet's interior molten for billions of years and will continue patiently for billions more. At the very top and bottom of the Earth, day and night themselves stop behaving the way you're used to. For months at a time near the poles, the sun never fully sets at all, circling low along the horizon in a slow, pale loop through what's called the midnight sun. And for an equal stretch, months later, the opposite happens. The sun never rises, leaving those same regions in a long, quiet polar night, lit only by stars, and sometimes, softly, by the aurora overhead. Whales moving slowly through the vastness of the ocean are able to call to one another across distances that are difficult to comprehend. Certain low, deep whale songs can travel for hundreds of miles through the water, carried efficiently by the ocean itself, allowing a single call to reach another whale on the far side of an entire sea. Slow conversation stretched across a scale built for giants. Scientists still don't know how many species actually share the Earth with us. Millions have already been named and studied, but researchers widely believe that millions more remain completely undiscovered, tucked into rainforest canopies, deep soil, and the furthest corners of the ocean, quietly living out their lives entirely unnoticed, waiting, in a sense, to be found. By raw weight, the Earth as a whole is made mostly of iron, far more than any other element, most of it gathered deep within the core where you'll never see it. And yet the thin crust you actually stand on, the ground beneath your feet, is made overwhelmingly of entirely different material, mostly oxygen and silicon, bound up quietly in rock and soil. The Earth you can touch and the Earth as a whole are, in this strange way, made of almost entirely different things. Coral reefs, though they cover only a small sliver of the ocean floor, support an outsized share of all marine life on Earth. Entire cities of fish and crustaceans and quiet drifting creatures gathered around structures built slowly, one tiny organism at a time, over centuries. The largest of these reef systems is big enough to be seen clearly from space, a pale living ribbon curling along the edge of a distant sea. And at night, from high above, the Earth reveals one more quiet secret: scattered points of golden light tracing the shape of human life across the dark, cities and coastlines glowing softly against the black, visible even from orbit, a delicate, glittering outline of everywhere that has learned, in its own small way, to hold back the night. And somewhere within all of that, impossibly small against the vastness of it all, is you. A brief, warm, quiet presence resting on the surface of a molten, magnetic, restlessly drifting, endlessly cycling world, spinning gently through the dark at 1,000 miles an hour. And yet still somehow, this quiet and this calm, The air surrounding you tonight is, in truth, mostly a single gas you rarely think about at all. Nitrogen makes up the vast majority of Earth's atmosphere, quiet and mostly unreactive, filling your lungs with every breath alongside the oxygen you actually use. It's easy to forget it's even there, drifting invisibly through every breath you've ever taken, outnumbering the oxygen many times over. Beneath the vast stretches of the Arctic and far northern land, the ground itself remains frozen not just through winter, but permanently, layer upon layer, for thousands of years at a time. This permafrost holds within it the slow, preserved remains of ancient plants and animals, some so well preserved by the endless cold that scientists have found creatures frozen in careful detail, undisturbed since long before any human walked nearby. The ocean, more than anything else on Earth, quietly regulates the planet's temperature, absorbing an enormous share of the sun's heat each year and carrying it slowly around the globe through vast patient currents. Without that slow blue engine working constantly beneath the waves, the difference between a summer afternoon and a winter night would be far harsher, far less forgiving than the one you've always known. Somewhere on Earth right now, while you rest here, someone else is waking into daylight on the opposite side of the planet. Their morning, your midnight, their winter, perhaps your summer. The seasons themselves run in opposite directions between the northern and southern halves of the world, so that as one hemisphere quietly settles into the cold and dark, the other is just beginning to warm beneath longer days. The moon hanging quietly wherever it happens to be in the sky tonight influences more of Earth's life than most people ever consider. Certain corals release their eggs into the sea only on very specific nights, timed precisely to particular phases of the moon. Other creatures shift their behavior gently with its cycle, an old quiet rhythm written into life long before anyone was here to name it. Time itself, on the scale the Earth actually operates on, dwarfs anything a single human life can truly hold. Scientists measure the planet's history not in years or centuries, but in vast stretches called epochs and eras, some lasting tens of millions of years apiece. Within that scale, the entire span of human civilization, every war, every song, every quiet night like this one, occupies a sliver of time so thin it barely registers at all against the planet's own slow, patient clock. The same planet that holds mountains taller than you could imagine and trenches deeper than any light can reach is right now simply turning slowly beneath you while you rest. The tides are rising somewhere, the wind is moving somewhere. A volcano quietly is breathing somewhere far away. And none of it needs anything from you right now except your rest. You've drifted tonight through the molten heart of the earth, up through its slow turning mantle, across its wandering continents, into its deepest trenches and its oldest forests, out through its thin, fragile sky, and finally up into the quiet, magnetic dark that wraps around it all. The whole vast story of this planet, spinning quietly beneath you, patient and old and endlessly turning. Let it hold you now, the way it's always held everything else. Let your breathing settle into its own slow rhythm, the way the tides settle against the shore. There's nowhere else you need to be. Nothing else you need to understand tonight. Just this quiet planet and this quiet rest, turning gently together in the dark. Sleep well and I'll see you next time for another 100 facts, drifting softly into sleep.